So what are you working on, or what are you dreaming about that you could be working on? What's got you motivated to do stuff in the outdoors? What could you be building towards? Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about dream trips and the importance of dream trips. And I'm going to start with a story in 2006. I met a guy who I was paddling with, and we both confessed that we had always wanted to paddle the Inside Passage. I had been thinking about it for a decade, probably. The Inside Passage is like the ultimate long-distance coastal touring kayaking trip, and really it runs from Seattle to Ketchikan, Alaska, though some people end it at Glacier Bay National Park outside. I said Ketchikan, I meant Skagway. Seattle to Skagway, Alaska. Some people end it in Glacier Bay. I think it's Glacier Bay, because Glacier National Park is a different park. I think it's Glacier Bay. Is it Glacier Bay, John?
Sure.
Okay, Johnny says sure. Ooh, we got a nice tailwind, which means we're going to be paddling into this on the way back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for 10 years I've been thinking about it. Me and this other guy, Travis, we both confessed we'd always wanted to do it. We confessed that we had read a lot of the same books to sort of make it happen, to like trip reports and stuff like that. To get a feel for the trip, but neither of us had taken any steps towards doing the actual trip. Like, we talked about it. I'd like to do this. Like the way people say, I'd like to hike the Appalachian Trail, who don't ever actually hike the Appalachian Trail. But then probably in 2008 or the beginning of 2009, I was like, no, you know what? I got to do this. I'm going to take the steps. And so the first step in doing this was to get my wife on board with me taking 6 weeks potentially to paddle that far, to get to the other side of the continent with a boat and all the gear that I would need. And then the other part was getting work on board, which was actually surprisingly easy. And I spent a year and a half planning it. And then in June 2011, those years don't line up, but you know what I'm talking about. In June of 2011, that I'm positive of, I got my butt and this very kayak to Ketchikan, Alaska, to paddle the Alaska section of the Inside Passage. It turns out that I had actually already done the British Columbia section, but that's a story for another day. And so a friend of mine met me in Ketchikan. So I drove to Skagway, got on the ferry with the boat, took that to Ketchikan, then met my friend Sarah. Then we both got on the water and paddled back to Skagway, where my wife met me, where my car was, and then she got on the ferry and went back to Vancouver, where she lived. All right, Whistler. She didn't live in Vancouver. I'm just making shit up now. So the point is that a year and a half of planning after 10 years of dreaming, or more than 10 years of dreaming, I was able to make that dream trip happen. And the important thing was that I set a goal and I worked towards it. And the things that I needed to work towards were acquiring a kayak for a trip like that, this one. I needed a dry suit. I needed the new tent, things like that. And that gave me a year and a half or so to acquire the gear that I needed and make the plan and all that stuff. And I really worked hard at it for a year and a half or more. The charts for the route were up on my wall, and I had 8 million notes about campsites and stuff like that. So the byproduct of that sort of longish story is that I realized really just how easy it is to have a dream trip in mind. An interesting thing happens once you do a trip like that. Once you sort of realize that you can make a trip like that happen, it's much easier to make a trip like that happen. The last chapter in my book, though, is called Next Steps. And in that, I have my next step, which is a sailing next step. And so I decided year and a half, or no, I guess 2 years ago, I've been sailing now for almost 2 years. I decided that I wanted to sail across the Atlantic. And that, at the time, was a super big challenge in my head, much like the Inside Passage was in 2009, because I didn't and still don't own a sailboat. I didn't, but now know how to sail. I still have a ton to learn, but everyone has a ton to learn. But it gave me something to focus on and something to work towards, and that is super important. And so I think that if you're active in the outdoors and are doing something you really enjoy, I think it's great that you're active in doing something you enjoy, but I think it's important to set a goal that's going to build your skills and that's going to force you a little bit outside of your comfort zone. And so a year ago, Johnny got serious about paddling. He bought a beautiful boat. It's really
It looks amazingly like yours.
Well, it looks far newer and prettier than mine. So Johnny got serious about paddling. In my book, I highlight two people that made plans with no skills. So Andrew, who I think, Johnny, you know Andrew, right? Decided he was going to ride his motorcycle to Alaska. And at the time, he didn't have any money, didn't have a motorcycle, didn't know how to ride a motorcycle. And another friend of mine, Molly, decided that she just wanted a life in the outdoors. She worked in an office and was not very happy working in an office, but had a great job and didn't want to leave it. So she was like, I want to be doing stuff in the outdoors. And I saw her in a bunch of classes. And about a year after she decided that she wanted to have a life that involved the outdoors, she climbed Kilimanjaro, which I think is super cool. Johnny, what do you think about having dream trips to work towards?
I have reached a point in my life that it keeps me going.
Okay.
I have a desk job that I love the company for which I work, but I'm almost 52 and finally know that there's a lot more to life. And working with you over the past year, reading your book, I'll tell a little story. When you brought me my copy of the book, you said flip to the last chapter, and I was like, ooh, sailing, and then Atlantic crossing, and this was a couple years ago, and actually just before my 50th birthday, and I was like, oh no, and now I'm like,
you were fine with the concept of sailing, but no about the idea of crossing an ocean.
right,
Yeah.
but now my switch has been flipped, and thinking about that, planning for it, seeing what you've done, sort of reverse engineering the process. Here's the goal. Now let's back up and figure out how to start and how we're going to get there. It's not if we can get there, it's no, how are we going to get there? And one of the things that you lay out, you have to talk to work about it. I've already done that stuff. And so the company for which I work, they're like excited about this for me. So I'm like, okay, that's one check mark. My wife is good. That's another check mark. So,
And honestly, those are the big ones.
yeah.
So people frequently talk about the reasons they can't do a trip like the Inside Passage or the Appalachian Trail or sailing across an ocean, or anytime they need that big block, there's a list of reasons that people can't do whatever that thing is. And the reasons are what I think of as I don't haves, right? I don't have the time, the money, or the permission are the three big ones. Time and money can be fixed. Those are relatively easy. And by permissions, it's permission from work, permission from your spouse or your partner or whatever, or permission from your family. I know a lot of AT thru hikers whose family were like, no, you can't do that. It's too dangerous, which is usually the reason. But getting that permission is actually surprisingly easy. When I was talking to Andrew, when I wrote that book, he told me that he got permission from work by asking. And when people said to him, oh, I could never get time off from work, his set response is, did you ask? And invariably, everyone says, no, I didn't ask. And he's like, well, that's how it starts, right? It's generally not that hard. Those are the things that people put in the way of doing those. But it gives you that ability to plan ahead, I like that term, sort of reverse engineer what needs to happen now to make this work. And it gives you a way to build skills, right? So what are you working on, or what are you dreaming about that you could be working on? what's got you motivated to do stuff in the outdoors? What could you be building towards to ramp your skill set up as an excuse to buy new gear, whatever it might be? Put it down in the comments below. I want to know what you guys are thinking about, and if I can help, I'm happy to help. So that's why. Oh, you know, I forgot to say, hey, this is 2 Minute Tuesday. We're going to do this in 2 minutes. We did it in 11. Perfect. So let me know in the comments what you're working on. I want to know. All right, we certainly planned that well. It's packed here now, our little lake, and Johnny and I were the only vehicles here when we got on the water. So super nice. We're done for the day. It's 10:30. Really nice paddle. If this content is working for you, hit the like button, hit subscribe. Keep track of our work towards building towards a dream trip, and then what are you doing to build towards a dream trip. But that's it. All right, I'll see you outside.